So if you own a Gen 4 or a Gen 5 Glock with the MOS optic mounting system, you have to use a plate to mount your optic to the slide. And once you spend enough time with optics on handguns, you will realize that the best option is to be able to mount your optic directly to the slide without a plate. Now there are a few companies out there that are making optics that will direct mount to an MOS Glock slide. But now that Glock has gone to the Gen 6, they're using a different optic mounting system now. We're probably not going to see too many more optic options for the MOS system. So let's say you go to the used market and you want to buy a Gen 5 or a Gen 4 Glock MOS. And now you want to put an optic on that gun, but your money is a little tight. Well, Zulisy has you covered with the S6-GM. We're over on the other bench, and we're going to go over all the specs and features of our Zulisy S6-GM. Now I'm going to bring a picture up on the screen and show you everything that comes in the box, and you can pause it and check it out. Now the S6 is a direct mount optic to go on a Glock with the MOS optic mounting system. There are a couple other companies out there making dots to go direct on the slide so you don't have to use the plate system from Glock. But keep in mind this will not work with the 43X or the 48 MOS. This will work with your Glock 19s, 17s. I'm going to be putting this on my Glock 40 10mm. But if you do have a 43X or a 48 with the MOS system, this is not going to work. I also want to point out if you have a new Gen 6 Glock, this optic is not going to work with that either. So let's get some quick specs out of the way. This has an overall length of 1.93 inches. The width on this is 1.43 inches. And the height on this is 1.11 inches. And this optic's got a little bit of weight to it. It weighs in at 1.84 ounces. Now the S6 housing is made out of 7075 T6 aluminum. It is shockproof and it has an IPX7 waterproof rating. Now this does have a side load battery. It runs on a CR1632 battery and it has a 50,000 hour runtime, but obviously that's going to be on the lowest setting. And this optic does have shake awake and we will be testing that out towards the end of the video. Alright, I've got the dot turned on. I've got it all the way up on the brightest level, and I am getting a little bit of starbursting. That's not an issue with the dot. It's because I have astigmatism. But overall, it's not too bad, and it is incredibly bright. Now, this has a 6 MOA red dot. There is no multi-reticle on this, and you do have 10 brightness settings. You've got 8 daytime and 2 NV. Now to adjust your brightness level up and down, you've got your plus and minus buttons here. You got your plus at the top, minus at the bottom. And they are pretty tactile and audible clicks. Now the window size on this optic is pretty decent size. It's kind of short, but it does have a nice wide window. And the window size on this is 25.4 millimeters by 17 millimeters. Now, one thing I like to do in every one of these optic review videos is test the windage and elevation to see how tactile and audible the clicks are. Our windage is here on the side. We do have an arrow pointing down with an R. Pretty easy to see. Let's check it first. Not bad. They're tactile. You can feel the stops in between each click. Not real audible. You do have 45 MOA of total travel on the windage and on the elevation, and your clicks are 1 MOA per click. Let's check the elevation. Same thing. They're tactile. Positive stop in between each click. Not real audible. And you do have your U for up with your arrow pointing towards the front of the optic. And the last thing, this does come with Zulisy's lifetime warranty. So the gun that I decided to mount this optic on is my Glock 40. And the reason I mounted it on my Glock 40 is because, well, it's the only Glock I have with the MOS optic mounting system. And if you're not familiar with the Glock 40, it is a long slide 10mm. And I figured this is probably going to be a pretty good test for this optic, considering I have this in my Recover Tactical 2021 stabilizer kit, and pretty much all the ammo I was using at the range was my reloads. And my 10mm reloads, they're stout, because you're going to learn real quick if you decide to pick up a 10mm, most of your factory ammo options are pretty weak. Now, the first thing I did when I got to the range was get the optic sighted in. I set up my USPSA targets and my steel targets. I loaded up a couple mags, and I started putting 2 shots on the USPSA targets, transitioning to the steel targets, just to get a feel for this gun because, well, it's been quite a while since I shot it. And 10mm, especially my reloads, got quite a bit more punch than the 9mm that I'm normally shooting. Now, just like all the other Zulisy optics I've tested on the channel, the red emitter was plenty bright, and when I got to the range, I had the optic turned all the way up, and I was getting a little bit of starbursting, not very much, not as bad as it is here in the studio, but I turned this down to brightness level 8, and that was plenty bright enough, and that's what I ran it on the rest of the day. Now, I was having no issues seeing the red dot on the white steel plates or the brown USPSA targets, and the glass quality on this is great, just like every other Zulisy I've tested on the channel. The glass is clear, does have just the slightest blue tint to it, but other than that, I was real happy with it. Now, once I ran a couple mags through this, I wanted to shoot some 10-shot groups, and again, I was having no issues seeing the red dot on the black and red target. And when I was done shooting those 10-shot groups, I had about 60 or 70 rounds racked up on this optic, and it was holding zero just fine, and the optic was not coming loose off of the slide. Now, transitioning from target to target with this optic is very easy. The optic is actually fairly wide. Pretty good size window on this. I wish it was just a little bit taller like the Zulisy Oak Plus, but all in all, I was having no issues with it, even in this Recover Tactical stabilizer kit. So I'm not going to drag this video out. I have reviewed every Zulisy optic that they've put out, and I've only had issues with one, and I contacted them, and they took care of that issue right away. So at this point, Zulisy has proven to me that they make a great optic. So let's get into the pros and cons with this optic. We'll hit the cons first because I've only got a couple cons with it. In fact, technically I only have one con, but I know a lot of you watching this video are going to have a con with this. My con with this is I wish they would have just made it a little taller. I would have liked to seen the window on this the same size height-wise as it is width-wise. But I also understand why they're keeping it a little lower profile, because people putting this on a Glock 19 or a Glock 45, they're probably carrying that gun, so they're going to want a little bit shorter optic. So I get it. Me personally, with this setup, I would have just liked to seen the window the same height as the width. The second con is the con that a lot of people are going to have, and they do not like this side load battery style. I personally don't care. In fact, I kind of like it. I have quite a few optics like this. It doesn't bother me a bit. I think it looks cool. But a lot of people don't like it. And it's because of this hanging off one side of the optic. They would rather just have the battery tray. But there is a trade-off to having a battery tray like that. You either got one small screw holding that tray to the optic, or possibly two. They're a pain in the ass when you take the screws out and you have to change the battery and put them back in, especially if they're not captured. The screws are very easy to lose if you drop one, and I have had a couple of those screws back out before at the range. So that is why I'm a fan of this style battery compartment. Now let's get into the pros because, well, there's a lot of pros with this optic. First off, the price. This optic is coming in at 170 beans. And if you use my discount code right here, that's even going to save you more money off of this optic. The second pro, well, it direct mounts right to a Glock with the MOS optic system. And like I said at the beginning of the video, anytime you can direct mount an optic to a slide and not use a plate, you're better off. The third pro for me, whether you like it or not, it's very simple to change the battery on this optic. The next pro, reliability. Had no issues with this optic. Now, I only ended up racking up 300 rounds, but those were 300 rounds of my 10mm reloads, so I figured that was a pretty good amount of stress to throw on this optic. And if you're asking yourself, why didn't I do the tailgate test like I normally do with all the optics? Well, I paid for this Glock 40. And being that it is a Gen 4, 10mm long slide, they're getting harder to get your hands on. So I'm taking just a little bit better care of this gun than some of my other ones. The next pro with this is that it's got that nice big wide window. It might not be the best option for this setup that I have, but this optic's going to work really well with your Glock 17, your 19, your 45. And this optic is plenty bright, and you turn this down to 7 or 8 on the intensity, and then you're getting very little starbursting, even if you have astigmatism like I do. So at the end of the day, I definitely recommend this optic. There's still quite a few people buying the Gen 4 and Gen 5 Glocks, even though the 6s are out. And maybe you just don't want to spend $300, $400, $500 on an optic to mount on that gun. Well, I think this is going to be a pretty good option for them. And I really want to thank Zulisy for sending this out to the channel. And I've been reviewing these Zulisy optics now for about 3 years. And like I said earlier, I've only had one fail. And when it comes to the price of their optics, it's pretty hard to beat. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.